Okay, let's just jump right in. We are tackling, I think, one of the most stubborn and just universal problems for anyone trying to learn something big, something complex like English. We're talking about the slump.
Hmm. The slump. The Great Wall.
Exactly. You know the feeling, right? You start out with all this incredible momentum. You're full of energy. You're just, consuming everything you can find. And then, boom, it just hits you. This mental fatigue.
Right. That initial wave, that that novelty and adrenaline, it just fades. It has to.
Yeah.
Suddenly the material stops being this exciting new world, and it just starts to feel like homework, like this heavy administrative chore you have to do.
Heavy is the right word for it.
And as your sources so accurately put it, that beautiful, powerful motivation you started with, that raging fire, it can shrink right down to just a tiny spark.
A tiny spark. I love that phrasing. And it's not just that you're putting in less effort, is it? It feels like something deeper. It's like this profound crisis of confidence.
It is. It's a crisis of consistency.
Yeah.
You start to question everything.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
this is the moment, this is the fork in the road where most people, I think, they quit. Not because they can't do it, not because they aren't capable, but because they just don't have the toolkit, really, the structural and emotional toolkit to navigate that inevitable downward swing.
Mm.
So our mission today is, well, it's surgical. We've gone really deep into the material you sent over, your articles, the research, all those personal notes, and we're pulling out the most practical, the most immediate, and hopefully the most sustainable motivation hacks to address this thing head on.
And we are moving way beyond the simple kind of generic advice of, just try harder or be more disciplined.
Oh yeah, that's useless.
It's worse than useless. It's often damaging. We're looking at the foundational architecture that you need for sustained effort. We're going to analyze the psychological feedback loops, the social leverage points, and the emotional resilience strategies that your sources recommend. All of it is designed to transform that tiny spark back into consistent warmth.
Okay, so to do that, we have to start at the source of the heat, right? The absolute core. And I think your source material is just excellent here because it simplifies motivation down to this single essential idea. Motivation is simply your why.
That's it. If we were to just distill months, even years of psychological research into a single question, that would be it.
Your why.
Yeah. If you can't articulate, I mean, really clearly articulate the fundamental reason you started this whole journey,
Yeah.
then any trick or, structural hack we talk about later today, it's just going to fail.
It will because it doesn't have any fuel.
Exactly. It's an engine without gasoline. It's just a piece of metal.
And the sources didn't just leave this as some, abstract philosophical concept, which I really appreciated. They gave these powerful, really concrete examples of what a strong why actually looks like.
Right.
So on the one hand, you have the external stuff. It could be a purely communicative, an outward-facing goal, like I want to be able to talk to new people from other countries.
Which is a huge one. Maybe for business, maybe for travel.
Right. And that's a motivator that's tied to connection, to global opportunity. It's about what the language gets you in the outside world.
And that type of extrinsic motivation, where the reward comes from the outside, it's incredibly powerful, especially in the beginning. It gets you started. But the sources also highlighted the critical value of intrinsic motivation. And that's the motivation that comes from internal pleasure,
Yeah.
from joy.
And the example they used was perfect. The desire to watch movies without subtitles.
Yeah.
I love that example so much because it immediately changes the entire nature of the task. Learning English is no longer this chore you do in a quiet room by yourself. It becomes the key that unlocks immediate personal entertainment.
Reframes the whole thing.
Totally. When the language itself is the tool for your own enjoyment, that intrinsic motivation is just, it's so much more robust. It's more resilient against slumps than, I need to do this for my job in 5 years.
Yeah, because the reward is now, not in 5 years.
Yeah.
And we have to understand that whether your why is connection or entertainment, it doesn't really matter. The source material defines it as the fire inside that says go.
The fire inside that says go.
And we have to acknowledge, like the sources did, that there will be days when that fire is just a tiny spark.
Of course.
Our whole goal today and your goal going forward is not to demand this inferno every single day. That's impossible. It's unsustainable. The goal is just to implement systems that guarantee the spark stays alive so it can catch fire again tomorrow.
Keeping that spark alive, that's the game. And that's where, the initial wild enthusiasm has to give way to something a bit more methodical, a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Which brings us directly to our first big pillar, how we actually structure our efforts to guarantee success, not just, hope for it. Okay, so let's dive into this. The architecture of effort. I like that phrase. If motivation is the fire, then your goal-setting system is the framework you build to hold the wood.
Yeah, the hearth.
Right. And if you build a terrible framework, the fire just collapses. It turns to ash. And the most common terrible framework, according to the sources, is focusing on goals that are just way, way too large.
No, like a classic mistake.
Yeah.
The sources are so critical of these big, scary, distant goals. When you define your success as, say, I want to speak English fluently in 1 year.
Which sounds like a good goal on the surface.
It sounds great, but it's cognitively overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's so massive and so abstract that your brain just immediately registers the vast distance between where you are right now and where you want to be.
And that distance creates what you might call initiation friction, which is just a motivation killer.
A total killer.
The second you even think about opening your textbook, your brain flashes this image of a year of impossible, grinding work ahead. And what wins? The path of least resistance? Procrastination. Scrolling on your phone, anything but that.
It's like standing at the base of Mount Everest and telling yourself you have to climb the entire thing before breakfast. That feeling of inadequacy, that I can't possibly do this, that is a fire extinguisher for motivation.
So the strategy has to be a complete pivot, a 180. Shifting the focus from that impossible, distant peak to the immediate next step.
Exactly. This is what the sources call the micro-goal strategy. And they insist on goals that are so small, so microscopic, that they practically guarantee you will succeed in the next 5 minutes.
Okay, so we're not talking about study for an hour.
No, not even close.
Yeah.
We're talking about the most basic, most achievable task you can imagine.
Give me an example.
The source suggests something as simple as this. Today, I will learn 1 new word.
One. Just one word.
Just one. They even use the word motivation as the example, to be a little meta.
Huh, I like that.
You find the definition, you say the word out loud, maybe write it down, goal complete. You're done.
And the power of that is what? It feels too simple.
Well, the power is manifold. First, it requires almost zero cognitive effort to start. You completely eliminate that initiation friction we were talking about. And second, and this is the most crucial part, it guarantees a successful outcome. You are engineering a win. And this is the vital component of the neurological feedback loop we need to build.
Let's expand on that mechanism, because I think this is where the real insight from the sources is. This isn't just some, cute mental trick. It's a conditioning cycle.
It is absolutely a conditioning cycle. When you set and immediately complete a micro goal, your brain registers what you could call a competence hit.
A competence hit.
Yeah, that little satisfying feeling of achievement. I did the thing I said I would do.
And that hit triggers a positive emotional response, right? There's a small burst of dopamine involved.
Exactly. And that satisfaction, that little moment of happiness, that is the true motivation for tomorrow's session. You're not relying on willpower. You are literally training your brain that the act of starting, even on a tiny task, leads directly to a feel-good reward.
So it's the complete opposite of the big goal structure.
The antithesis.
Where the emotional result is almost always, I failed again today, I didn't study for an hour. It's just constant demotivation.
With micro goals, you stack small, repeatable wins. And the feeling of momentum, not some abstract concept of willpower, is what drives the effort forward.
This is perfectly summed up in the mountain analogy that the sources provided.
I love this analogy. It's so profound in its simplicity.
So the idea is, when you're climbing a huge mountain, you do not look at the summit.
Never look at the top. If you look at the top, it looks impossible. It will crush you.
So what do you do?
You look only at the next step, the very next place you need to put your foot. You focus only on the next 5 or 10 minutes of effort.
And this just simplifies the whole existential challenge of learning a new language.
Mhm.
It breaks it down into this series of manageable, non-threatening steps.
Right. You're no longer carrying the full weight of fluency on your shoulders. You're only carrying the weight of learning one new word or listening to one short English song.
And that perspective shift is what makes the whole journey feel sustainable. It feels possible, even when the actual material is really, really challenging.
And think about what else it's doing. That accumulation of success, it reinforces the idea that you are, in fact, capable. You are stacking proof points.
Oh, that's good.
Every single successful micro goal is a piece of data that proves I can do this. And this actively combats that inevitable, nasty voice of self-doubt that's always screaming, you're not making any progress.
So we've set the structure for these guaranteed small wins. The next logical step then, and I think it's the required complement to the micro goals, is making sure the emotional payoff from those wins is actually loud enough.
Mm-hmm. Loud enough for the brain to register it and remember it.
Right. Which moves us to the art of celebration.
Yes. If the micro goal is the action, then celebration is the mechanism that stamps that action with value. It underlines it.
It makes it
It makes it real. Small goals only work if the brain registers them as a substantial win, not just, another item crossed off a to-do list. Celebration transforms that achievement into concrete, remembered motivation for the next day.
And the sources break this down into a really interesting three-layered approach. It starts with the internal celebration, positive self-talk.
Which sounds a bit cheesy, maybe, but it's the active decision to be kind to yourself, to break down those negative internal scripts that so many of us have.
So instead of finishing your one word and immediately rushing to the next thing,
You pause.
yeah,
You actually take a second and you acknowledge the effort. You can just say to yourself, good job, you did it. Or, hey, that was smart. It's critical.
because so many high-achieving learners are their own worst critics.
Absolutely. If you successfully complete your micro goal, but you immediately tell yourself, "Ugh, that was too easy, I should have done more," you've just negated the entire psychological benefit of the win.
You've canceled it out. And that internal praise, it internalizes the success. You become your own supportive coach.
Yes. Which prevents the work from feeling like this perpetual, thankless grind that's being dictated by some, distant teacher or some external authority figure.
Okay, so that's layer one, the internal. Layer two is the external celebration, which involve these immediate, small, tangible rewards.
And the specific example they gave, using a small piece of chocolate after learning a new word, is just fascinating because of its mechanism.
It's so simple, but it leverages the power of immediacy, right?
Exactly. The learning task is mental, it's abstract, but the reward is physical, and it's immediately pleasant. This is where that term Pavlovian connection really comes into play.
So you're linking the successful completion of a desirable mental behavior, learning a word, with a guaranteed physical pleasant sensation.
And the reward has to be immediate. That's the key. It has to happen right after the task to effectively reinforce the behavior.
Which is so much more effective than a delayed reward, saying, if I study English all year, I'll take a big trip. That's nice, but it's too abstract.
It's way too far away to motivate the daily 15-minute effort. The daily reward needs to be right now. It reinforces the process, not just the distant outcome.
But let me challenge that for a second. If the sources are advocating for this, doesn't creating a Pavlovian link between English and, say, chocolate risk creating a kind of unhealthy habit?
That's a really valid critical point, and it speaks to the importance of the scale of the reward.
Okay.
The sources are careful to suggest a small piece of chocolate. The emphasis is on a momentary pleasant sensation, not a massive, calorific feast.
So the reward needs to be proportional to the effort.
Proportional, and something that can be easily consumed right away. The key is the instantaneous sensory gratification, not the reward itself being some massive life change. The habit we're trying to cement is not eating chocolate. The habit is initiating the task of learning.
That's a crucial distinction. The instant gratification is just a bridge. It's a tool to get you back to the long-term goal.
Precisely.
Okay, so that brings us to the third and maybe the most powerful layer of celebration, social celebration.
Sharing your small wins.
Yeah, with a study partner, a trusted friend, whoever.
Success is so often just an internal state, right? Which is easily forgotten or downplayed. But when you share it, when you say out loud, hey, I watched a 5-minute English video today and I actually understood 3 new sentences, you're making it concrete.
And then you receive that external validation.
Exactly. Your friend says, wow, that's genuinely amazing. I'm so proud of you. And that external validation, it leverages our innate social instincts.
So that 5 minutes of effort is suddenly magnified. It's validated by another person, which makes the achievement feel real, and it solidifies it in your memory.
It also taps into what psychologists call the consistency bias.
What's that?
Well, once you tell someone you did something, you feel a stronger internal obligation to repeat that action. You want to be able to report success again next time.
Ah, I see. So you're not just motivated for yourself anymore.
Right. You also feel motivated to maintain that positive image in the eyes of your social support system.
Yeah.
And that external fuel is just incredibly potent on days when your own internal reserves are running really low.
That's a really smart combination. So if we maximize these small, achievable goals, and then we layer on immediate celebration, internal, tangible, and social, we build this consistent momentum that actively pushes back against the natural decay of motivation. But all of these structural hacks, they still kind of assume you're working by yourself. What happens when the work still feels lonely?
And it will.
We need to look outside the self.
And that loneliness, it's a silent killer of motivation. It really is. Structural foundations are absolutely critical, but human beings are social creatures. We're wired for connection.
So when learning English just means sitting alone at a desk night after night.
The sources recognize that isolation very quickly transforms into this corrosive self-doubt.
Yeah, the sources describe that loneliness leading to all these questions spinning in your head, like, am I wasting my time? Is my pronunciation actually terrible? Why isn't this vocabulary list sticking in my brain?
And without a benchmark, without someone to share that struggle with, those self-doubts they metastasize. They grow.
Which brings us to the study partner advantage. And the sources frame this not as some, secondary luxury, but as a necessary proactive strategy.
It's a core strategy to combat isolation
Yeah.
and to build a mutual accountability structure.
So let's break down the practical benefits because they're huge. First, the immediate feedback loop. You can just ask questions. You can get instantaneous answers. You eliminate that frustration of, waiting hours for a tutor to email you back or wading through 50 confusing online forums.
That immediate clarification just saves so much mental energy. It keeps you in the flow.
And secondly, it directly addresses the biggest stumbling block for so many people in language learning, actually speaking.
The fear of speaking.
Right.
The sources really emphasize that speaking with a study friend is, and I'm quoting, less scary than speaking with a stranger.
That is a huge deal. You're lowering the psychological risk.
You're lowering the stakes.
Yeah.
You trust this person, which allows you to take risks. You can try out that weird pronunciation. You can fumble with a new grammar structure.
And they're not going to laugh at you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This psychological safety net is just.
Right.
It's non-negotiable.
Yeah.
If you're afraid of making mistakes, you won't speak. And if you don't speak, fluency is literally impossible.
So the friend provides this dedicated low-stakes sandbox, a place where mistakes aren't failures, they're just data points.
That's a great way to put it. They're just data.
The third major benefit is that mutual motivation, the accountability.
Right. The source material frames this like a team structure.
Yeah.
On those days when you feel sluggish and lazy and you just want to watch TV,
Which will happen.
it will happen. Your friend steps in. They send you a text that says, hey, let's just do 15 minutes of flashcards together today. Just 15.
And because you don't want to disappoint your teammate, you do it.
You act. That external accountability forces the action, even when your internal desire is completely flatlining. It just stabilizes the effort across both of your slumps.
But let me bring in some friction here.
Yeah.
What happens if the friend is also feeling lazy? Doesn't this strategy sometimes lead to mutual demotivation? You don't want to study, me neither. Great.
Huh, yes. That's the flaw in a purely casual partnership. It can definitely happen.
So what's the solution?
Well, the sources imply that the partnership needs some kind of structure. The solution lies in defining the relationship not just around let's study sometime, but around scheduled check-ins.
Ah, okay.
So even if you both feel low energy, the agreement is that you'll still meet for just 10 minutes. You'll share one piece of success from the last week, and then you'll recommit to one micro goal for the next day.
So the partner's primary role becomes consistency reinforcement, not necessarily like complex teaching.
Exactly. The accountability is to the schedule and to the relationship, not just to the material itself.
That makes a lot of sense. And crucially, a partner lets you shift from what can feel like tedious study into, well, into fun.
Yes.
You can deliberately integrate games together, board games, card games, even simple verbal games like 20 questions, all played exclusively in English.
And this just totally transforms memory work into a shared, competitive, and genuinely enjoyable activity.
And that move towards fun, that leads directly to the core principle of intrinsic motivation that you mentioned earlier. The idea is that if you genuinely love what you're doing, the fun is the motivation. You never have to go looking for it separately.
When learning becomes its own reward, the slump just has so much less power over you.
So we're looking for what the sources call the win-win scenario, where your desire to complete an already pleasurable activity naturally requires you to engage with English.
This fundamentally reframes the language. It stops being this external, mandatory school subject, and it becomes a necessary tool for your own personal gratification.
And the sources gave some excellent, really actionable, interest-specific examples of this. Let's expand on the cooking one.
Okay.
So if you, the listener, have a passion for food, for baking, whatever, the hack is simple. You find a recipe, maybe something challenging like making a perfect chocolate cake from scratch, and you commit to only using English language sources for the instructions.
So no translation.
Zero. And this creates this kind of high-stakes, practical vocabulary acquisition. You're no longer learning random words from a list.
You are learning specific context-relevant terms. Words like flour, sugar, egg, whisk, mix, preheat.
And you learn them instantly because if you confuse flour and sugar, the cake is ruined.
The motivation isn't some distant goal of fluency. The motivation is the delicious, tangible outcome, the cake itself. It is the ultimate, immediate, positive, edible celebration that ties directly back to your language input.
You literally get to taste the success of your English efforts.
That's brilliant.
Okay, what if you're a huge sports enthusiast? Cooking isn't your thing.
The source suggests watching a game with English commentary. And the key here, which is so important, is to manage your expectations. You should not be trying to understand every single word immediately.
Right, that would be incredibly frustrating.
Precisely. This is what's called an exposure technique. You're tuning in for the excitement, the energy of the game, the play-by-play. You're focused on the tension, not the difficulty of the language.
So your ear is just passively absorbing the cadence, the rhythm, the tone, and some specific action words.
Yes. The emotional anchor of the sport itself does all the heavy lifting. The thrill of watching that winning goal or that dramatic play, it overrides the analytical part of your brain that wants to just stop because it doesn't understand.
So you're absorbing language subconsciously while being actively entertained. The existing emotional pull of the game anchors the English input. That's really clever.
And finally, the sources talk about the power of video games.
The huge one for so many people.
The tip is simple. Change the game's language interface to English. And this is so incredibly effective because most dedicated gamers already have this deep contextual knowledge of the game's mechanics.
Right. You already know how the menus work, what the health bar is, what the action prompts generally mean.
So you can start to guess the meanings of new vocabulary based purely on those contextual cues. It transforms language acquisition into a fun challenge. You're using the game's built-in success metrics, like leveling up or completing a quest, as proxies for your own language learning success.
The beauty of all this, of integrating learning into existing hobbies, is that when you feel tired of studying,
Hmm.
you're simply shifting your focus from formal learning, like grammar drills, to applied learning, making the cake, playing the game. The effort continues, but the mental strain is just dramatically reduced.
The learning becomes invisible.
So, okay, we've established the structure for consistency, and we've built an environment for fun. But what happens when the game gets frustrating, the cake fails to rise, your friend is busy, and that core self-doubt just screams at you, I am not smart enough for this.
Mm.
We need a resilience strategy that goes deeper than chocolate. And that brings us to the necessary emotional bedrock.
And this is the deepest part of the slump. This is the moment of profound emotional exhaustion where the structural hacks, on their own, they start to fail.
Right.
When the goal truly feels impossible, you, the learner, you need to be able to access a source of unshakable emotional support, a
Right.
source of courage.
And the source material takes a really fascinating and deep turn here. It starts discussing how finding strength and hope and courage can provide that necessary bedrock. And it specifically references religious faith as one example of an external, immovable source of motivation for people who share that faith.
And our role here is to impartially analyze how the sources are interpreting and applying these specific words to provide that motivational strength during a psychological slump.
Right. It's about connecting the struggle of language learning to these universal human challenges.
Hmm.
Fear, feelings of inadequacy, and the need for perseverance.
Exactly. The key concept here is accessing external, unshakable strength at the very moment when your own internal reserves are completely empty.
So let's start with the specific feelings that cause people to quit. The first one has to be fear. The fear of making a mistake, the fear of being judged.
Hmm.
And the sources reference a simple but profoundly powerful message addressing this from the book of Joshua.
Yes, Joshua 1.9, which offers a direct instruction and then a promise. It says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go."
And when you apply that to language learning, the psychological utility is immediate.
It is. It directly combats that core anxiety of performance,
The fear of a grammatical error, of mispronouncing a word in a meeting.
or just of being laughed at. These are massive, massive barriers to speaking. The instruction, "Do not be afraid," it's an explicit command to push past that social anxiety.
And the promise that comes with it, that this supporting structure, whether you see it as divine or communal or something else, will be with you, that translates directly into a feeling of a shared burden.
Right. If you, the learner, feel that you're not alone in the challenge, the task just becomes less daunting. It shifts your focus away from anxiety and towards bravery.
So it reframes the simple act of trying to speak English as an act of courage.
Yes, which makes the effort feel noble. It feels sustainable.
And that reframing is essential, I think. It tells you that the emotional battle is the most important one. By simply having the courage to try, you are already succeeding in that spiritual or emotional dimension, regardless of whether the sentence you just put together was grammatically perfect.
And then we have to address the other big feeling, internal inadequacy. That moment when the task feels too complex and the learner's brain just says, "I am not smart enough to grasp this complex tense structure."
I think everyone has felt that. And for this, the sources use a passage from Philippians.
Philippians 4.13. "I could do all things through him who gives me strength." When a learner is battling a slump, they often believe their own personal capacity has been completely exhausted. This verse directly counters that feeling of intrinsic weakness.
And the interpretation provided by the source material is really vital here.
It is. It's not a magical guarantee of instant fluency.
Hmm.
That's not the point.
So what is it?
Instead, it offers a crucial psychological pathway. It says the strength required for these incredibly challenging tasks, like mastering a new language, doesn't need to be sourced only from your own depleted self-resources. It gives you permission to access an external, seemingly boundless source of strength.
So it completely changes the internal dialogue.
Completely. Instead of thinking, "I have failed because I'm too weak," the thought pivots. It becomes, "This is hard, but I can do this with external help."
It allows the learner to shed the burden of needing 100% self-reliance. It's a psychological reset that encourages you to try again, but with faith in an outside system of support.
And finally, for those moments when the goal feels absolutely 100% impossible, when you've tried, you've rested, you've failed repeatedly, and you are standing right on the precipice of quitting for good.
For those moments, the sources provide the ultimate motivational statement from the book of Matthew.
Matthew 19.26. With people, some things are impossible, but with God, all things are possible. And this provides the absolute bedrock of hope. It transcends the logical limits of your own current capacity.
So when the analytical, logical part of your brain is saying, statistically, I cannot succeed at this, I've tried too many times.
This message allows for the courage to continue. It replaces that cold logic with trust and with hope. It's the final firewall against quitting. It suggests that what feels like an impossible limit is not a permanent boundary, but just a condition that can be overcome through renewed faith and effort.
And the universal takeaway from this section, regardless of anyone's personal spiritual beliefs, is just so powerful.
It is.
The central motivational concept is the importance of finding a reliable rock, a source of strength outside of yourself, whether that's spiritual words, the unwavering belief of a friend, the support of your family, something to pull you through the sheer emotional weight of a long, difficult challenge.
That external strength is what sustains consistency when your own internal fire has been reduced to that tiny, flickering spark.
But you know, even with all that courage, that bedrock of hope, we have to be realistic. There will still be bad days.
Oh, absolutely.
Days where zero motivation exists. And the goal isn't to eliminate them, but to manage them strategically.
This brings us to a really practical point. How do you manage the bad day?
And the strategy here has to begin with the acceptance phase. The sources are so clear on this. It is absolutely okay to have a bad day.
It's more than okay, it's necessary. We are complex human beings. We are not machines that are programmed for linear progress. Trying to demand perfection from yourself every single day is a recipe for catastrophic emotional burnout.
We have to actively work against that culture of constant self-optimization. The cognitive load of life, your job, your family, health issues, it will inevitably consume all of your mental resources some days.
And the absolute worst thing you can do is to add self-flagellation on top of that exhaustion, beating yourself up for being tired.
So the crucial strategy for a bad day is not failure, but rest. It's what the sources call the pause button.
I love that, the pause button. A bad day is not a day you failed to study. It's a necessary rest period.
And the source material suggests just letting go. Listen to music in your own native language, relax, give your brain a genuine, guilt-free break.
And we really have to highlight the warning they provided. Do not push too hard on a bad day. If you force yourself to drill grammar when you are emotionally exhausted, you risk creating a deeply negative association in your brain.
You start to hate the act of learning.
And worse, you can start to hate the subject itself. English becomes the enemy. And that kind of subject aversion can take months, even years, to overcome.
So instead of defining the day as a failure, you consciously define it as a temporary pause. You hit pause and you promise yourself tomorrow is a new day, and you allow that rest to happen without any guilt.
But the key to making the pause button effective is the immediate reconnection the very next day.
Right. When you wake up, you don't wait for motivation to magically appear out of thin air.
It won't. You have to proactively return to your why, and you immediately implement a micro goal to just restart the engine.
So you remind yourself, okay, I'm doing this to travel. My goal today is simply to learn one new word related to travel, one word about booking a flight.
And you return to that simple, guaranteed success metric, just to restart that positive emotional feedback loop we talked about in section 1. The pause is temporary, and the restart has to be immediate and easy.
Which leads us to the final, I think, the necessary summary of this whole process. The journey of learning anything hard is not a straight line up.
It is not a linear progression. It is, by necessity, a cycle of learning.
A straight line just doesn't exist in human skill acquisition. It's a myth. You will not achieve 100% progress every single day. You won't even achieve every week.
You will have plateaus. You will have backward slips. And understanding this cycle is maybe the most powerful tool for managing your expectations and preventing that deep discouragement.
So let's break down the components of that cycle as the sources summarize it. It begins with high energy. You get motivated.
Right, spurred by a new goal or an exciting new resource. And this leads you to work hard to maximize your effort.
But that intensive work, it inevitably leads to the third phase. You get tired.
Which is not a moral failing. It is a biological and cognitive necessity. Your brain needs to recover.
And that tiredness necessitates the next phase. Rest pause. That's the bad day strategy. You allow yourself to step back without quitting.
And after some adequate rest, that little bit of distance allows you to remember your why. You reconnect with that intrinsic or extrinsic reason you started this whole thing.
And that memory serves as the spark that allows you to get motivated again, which starts the whole cycle over.
The sheer brilliance of this model is that it reframes the slump. The slump isn't a failure. It's a necessary, integrated component of the process. It's the recovery phase.
So when that downward trend hits, you don't panic, you don't feel like a failure, you just recognize it as, okay, this is the natural, necessary rest phase before the next upswing.
And the most important rule, the ultimate mandate, is that distinction between pausing and stopping forever.
That's everything.
It is perfectly okay to pause your learning for a day, for a week, maybe even for a season if life gets crazy, but the crucial thing is to not stop forever.
The pause button is a temporary strategy for recovery. Quitting is the permanent abandonment of your goal.
As long as you maintain that tiny spark of connection, you learn one new word, you listen to 1 minute of a song, the cycle will inevitably return you to a period of strong motivation and accelerated progress. You just have to commit to the cycle, not to the myth of linearity.
Wow. That was a truly comprehensive deep dive. I feel like we have covered the entire motivational ecosystem here. From the neurobiological structure of micro goals and celebration, all the way to the emotional bedrock you need to sustain hope during the absolute toughest slumps.
We did. We established that your why is the fuel. It's the core. Then we discussed how to build momentum with strategic planning, setting those small, psychologically rewarding goals and using layered celebration, internal, tangible, and social, to really amplify that sense of achievement.
And we learned the power of integration, finding a steady partner to fight back against the loneliness of the journey and weaving English into your existing hobbies like cooking or gaming, which transforms the learning from a chore into its own reward.
And finally, yes, we found the strength for resilience. Being kind to yourself on bad days by hitting that essential pause button and finding that unshakable hope and courage, that rock for when the task feels overwhelmingly, truly impossible.
And we just want to give you direct encouragement right now, you, the listener. Just by taking the time to absorb this entire deep dive, you have already achieved a win. You've consciously engaged in listening practice, and you've demonstrated a commitment to your journey.
That is a success. That's a micro goal completed.
It absolutely is. So go ahead and celebrate that. Grab that small, immediate reward right now, whatever it might be for you.
Remember, it's the accumulation of these small, celebrated wins that builds the fortress of consistency. The progress is not linear, but the effort it accumulates over time. It adds weight and substance to your overall capability.
And we want to leave you with one final thought, and this is based on a fascinating little nugget from the source material. It mentioned the power of sharing your motivation, your why, and it suggested that your personal reason for learning can actually inspire and motivate someone else too.
So if your learning journey is fundamentally a cycle of these necessary ups and downs, who are you sharing that cycle with? And how might your own successes, even those tiny micro wins like simply hitting the pause button instead of quitting, how might that be the unexpected spark that reignites someone else's struggling fire?
Think about the power your own persistence has to motivate an entire community, not just yourself.
That's a powerful thought.
Go forth, commit to the cycle, remember your why, and keep that tiny spark safe. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.